Welcome back, you guys. Today I want to show you a very reliable opening against a French defense that you can play not just in bullet, blitz or rapid, but also in classical chess, you guys. It is time for you to say goodbye to the French. So you start with e4, and after pawn to e6, you go pawn to d4 as usual. d5, you first of all go e5, and after pawn to c5, this is where you change your strategy and switch to a weird plan that will be unfamiliar to your opponents, beginning with the move pawn to a3. As you can see, this has also been played at the top level. You can check for yourselves in the master's database. No one has ever lost. My God. Anyway, after CD, you don't ever want to take back. We want to use this pawn as a shield. In other words, think of this as Black's biggest liability. This is our defender, so we'll just leave it like that. Think of this as a weird gambit. In this type of French defense, you only have to worry about one move, which you can easily defend, by the way, pawn to f6. And so to stop this, you want to rush out with a move bishop d3, because if pawn to f6, you will go queen h5 check. So Black will play something like knight c6, attacking your e5 pawn. And now you can safely play pawn to f4, holding on to your central pawn. See what happens if you make any other careless move like knight f3. You see, since your queen can't go to h5 now, Black may play pawn to f6. This is what I was talking about, and it kind of disturbs our plan. You are forced to take, and then Black takes back with a knight. They are doing fine, and that's why you don't just want to rush out with a move knight f3. Forget about this for the time being, which is why you always want to go pawn to f4, leaving an option of going queen h5 check, supported by your light squad bishop. Another point, now you see the importance of playing pawn to a3 back on move 4. Yep, it is to stop knight b4 or bishop b4 check. Let's see what most lichess players play in this position. You can see for yourselves, knight ge7 is what everybody plays. Sometimes they play bishop c5, and sometimes they just go ahead and blunder with f6, forgetting you have queen h5 check. Anyway, knight ge7 is the top played move, and now this is when you can go knight f3. Again, you can see in the master's database, no losses for white at this point. Anyway, this time f6 doesn't really make sense. Like here, you can just take, and after gh, you have knight h4, and Black has some issues to do with g6. For example, if bishop g7, you can easily go queen h5, make them lose their right to castle, like this, and now you continue playing your chess. In this line, at least you don't have to worry about queen b6 check and all that stuff, because Black is blocking himself. Not to mention that you are one move away from capturing on h7. If pawn to f5, these are just weaknesses. You can go back to f3 if you want and re-strategize. You also have pawn to g4, pawn break in some lines. Who are you? Anyway, you won't see most of your opponents playing f6 though. I was just trying to make a point. The move you will most likely see is knight f5 in this position. But what I used to do in the past was just to take. Taking is okay, but knight bd2 is best, because you want to put your queen's knight on b3 someday, or probably just relocate it to the king side as highlighted. If you're looking at knight e3, by the way, that's a 1-0 move. You have queen e2, and you're just one move away from getting back your pawn anyways. You don't even need to get it back. It's your best defender. Bishop c5 is what I see in the lichess database, but now you justify your point of developing your queen's knight to d2 first after bishop b6. Here you can even play pawn to c3 so that you take on d4 with tempo. There is no pawn takes, by the way, due to bishop takes e3. Come on, that's just a free piece. So you have all these tactics, you guys, all because of that little distraction you set on d4. Once again, start with the advanced variation. And the moment Black plays c5, you change your mind. You don't play pawn to c3 like what everybody does. You go pawn to a3. I read a book somewhere which was discussing this move in detail, especially when you are playing against the French. Sometimes you can start in a traditional way, put your pawns as highlighted, and then your fourth move can be pawn to a3 before you continue doing whatever you want to do. This pawn is a magical pawn. Anyway, so pawn to a3 once again. After cd, you don't take back. You go bishop d3. Again, if you go pawn to f4 right away, maybe Black may play pawn to f6, and you won't be in time to give a check on h5 due to g6. That's why before playing pawn to f4, you always want to start with bishop d3 so that f6 can be met with queen h5 check. Again, there's nothing much that you can see. Knight c6, attacking the e5 pawn is what everybody plays. Then you go pawn to f4. We saw what happens after knight e7. You know they intend to put their knight on f5 someday, after which you can go knight bd2. In fact, there's a line in this position after knight f5 and knight bd2. If black doesn't play knight e3 where you do this, and say they just continue normally with the move bishop e7. Once again, the idea of developing your knight on d2 is to put it on b3 someday so that you can take like this. Again, there's no need to rush, taking on f5. That's good, but it's not the best option in this world. Once again, knight e3. You don't have to be desperate, giving up your bishop pair. Just go queen e2, stopping knight takes g2. And maybe this time black may play queen b6, the move they like playing in the French defense. But you see, since you can't play pawn to c3, this time in order to win a free knight, due to queen takes, you can even take on d4 like this. Pap. Now the knight is under attack. Say after knight takes, you just take, you oversimplify the game, and after queen takes, you go queen takes e3 if you want to go straight into the end game against your higher rated opponent, or play bishop takes e3 if you are ready to fight. The point is, if queen takes b2 happens, now you castle short, or first make black lose his right to castle. This is also an interesting line where they do this, and then you take. After pap, you castle short or play king f2 or better king d2 because black doesn't have bishop b4 check due to your wonderful pawn on a3. And in this position, it is black who is supposed to be very careful. For example, if they just play moves like rook c8, first you can play queen d3 defending this and also targeting the h7 pawn. And maybe if something like rook c6, which looks normal because they want to double up their rooks, create a little battery. Now you can go rook hb1 and there is real trouble, you guys. In fact, the queen is trapped. There's nothing that black can do in this position unless they want to lose some more material. Now, after allowing black to take on d4 and then you play bishop d3, then knight c6 and pawn to f4. It's not every time you are going to see your opponents playing knight e7 with an intention to put it on f5. Sometimes you might see the move bishop c5 or bishop e7, it doesn't even matter. But once again, your job is very simple. Just to go knight f3, knight bd2 as you saw before, then put your queen's knight on b3, you castle short, blah blah blah. But see, in this particular line, because black's dark squared bishop is no longer guarding the g7 pawn, it makes sense for us to go queen g4. This is just another tactical move that you can try instead of knight f3 and knight bd2 then knight b3. Queen g4 actually forces black to play pawn to g6, creating some dark square weaknesses. And after this, you can safely play whatever you want. Knight f3, just continuing with your main plan. By the way, don't ever worry about this d4 pawn. It's your defender, it's your best defender, and you can easily capture it somewhere in the middle game. So here you can even play pawn to b4. After bishop b6, you have bishop b2 in the long run. You can also play knight f3 in this position. If you're looking at pawn to h5, that's a 1-0 move because you have queen g3. See, you will castle short very well and all that. In chess, it's not just all about how many pieces you have. It's about how many active pieces you have. Say knight e7, maybe here you can even castle short. If they do the same, you go knight h4. Maybe one day you will sack on g6. If king h7, you play king h1. Say knight f5. Here I think the knight is more active than my light squared bishop, so I'll take on f5 with my bishop so that after ef, I go knight d2. At least black doesn't have this discovery check. My king is on h1. And what I want to do is to put my queen's knight on g5 someday, God willing. Say bishop e6. I can even play bishop b2. No weaknesses. Rook c8, knight df3, a5, knight g5 check. This is the point. say king g7, knight takes e6 check, and after fe, I have queen takes g6 check, and it's just a matter of time before I checkmate my opponent. I mean, you're going to see these things happening in your games. Here you can play queen h6 check, for example, and after this, you take on e6 with tempo. If rook f7, you take on f5. I mean, it's just total disaster. Let's say this. First, you have queen g6 check. If king h8, you have rook f3, and after this, you have queen f6 check, king g8, then rook g3 check. It's just a matter of time. Again, you may think of this in terms of an obstruction or an interference tactic where you impose an enemy piece in order to close some critical lines for them. Now, you see, after bishop d3, if black rushes out with the move knight g e7, intending to go knight f5 next, once again you can just continue with your normal piece development, pawn to f4 since your last squad bishop is already on d3. And after knight f5, again you don't really have to take because you're just going to open up some lines for your opponent. You can play knight f3 once again. If knight e2, you know what to do. You play queen e2, you don't just get rid of your bishop pair just yet. If bishop e7 this time, since there's nothing to attack on c5, well, you can just castle short. And after castle short, look at this threat. These are moments where you want to get rid of your opponent's most active piece. This is okay. And after pawn takes, you take back on d4. That's if you want. With your knight, and if bishop c5 pinning your knight, or you can even go pawn to b4. That's the purpose of playing a3. If bishop takes, you take back with your queen, and if queen b6, by the way, you can just mess up your opponent's pawn structure and continue playing a normal game of chess. Bishop e3 looks great. It attacks the pawn. You're about to develop your other rook, and this is not the French defense that you see every day. Now let's look at one last line where black may be forced to destroy your strategy on the queen side. For example, after bishop d3, say black plays this unnatural move a6 with an idea of, playing b4 in the near future. Well, seeing this, you can rush out with knight d2 if you think about it. After pawn to b5, you go knight b3, because if b4 comes, you don't even have to take. You can just take on d4 if you want, or leave that as your defender and rather go knight f3. If pawn takes, you take back with your a pawn. Still, black can't play bishop b4 check or knight b4 in the near future. If queen b6 for some reason, you can just castle short. At any given point in time, you will be able to take that pawn, maybe somewhere in the middle game after you put your king on h1. See that this time we didn't play pawn to f4 but knight f3. This is also fine. I just wanted to show you that anything is playable. After b4, we played knight f3. Pawn to f4 is also playable. Nothing wrong with this, by the way. If ba, you take back. I just don't want you guys to, to be memorizing stuff. You go knight f3, knight c6, you castle short. And always remember, after castling short, it is always safe to put your king on h1 in most of these lines. If knight f5, you can even take up. If you want, you can take to oversimplify things. I mean, this is just how easy you can play against the French. Look at this move. Instead of taking, you even pin the knight. Bishop c5, you go bishop takes. If bishop takes, you go knight takes. After castle short, look who has some weaknesses to worry about. I can play queen d3 in this position and continue with my normal development. Similar to the French defense, if you face a Caro-Kann player, just go pawn to d4, and after d5, you don't advance or take. Even though that's very much playable, you go bishop d3. Follow what I showed you in my yesterday's video. This is the line that I recommend for now, but there are so many things that you can do against a Caro-Kann. You can play the two knights attack, the classical variation, the advanced variation, the exchange variation. But why playing bishop d3 on the third move? Well, you just want them to take so that later on you can position your last squad bishop on f3 rather than developing your knight here. And after bishop f5, I said this is where you can even go pawn to g4. If you want to know more about this line, be sure to check out my yesterday's video on my channel. Now, time for you to go and check out my new e5 defense course, which I have also linked in the comment section down below. And I'm glad to say so far it has received a lot of attention and people are getting it like crazy. So it's an opening response that you try against white's e4 opening. You're going to learn how to play against the Scotch, the Royal Pace, the Bishop's opening, 3 Knights opening, the 4 Knights game, the Vienna game, even the Italian game. So it's the complete e5 defense course that I just launched with my team. You better go and check it out. Thank you so much for watching this video. Until next time, have a wonderful day. Bye bye.